Where I would recommend any organization starting, especially, if you have a good handle on this, if you've had CMMC, on your radar for a while, if you have a, robust, fully functioning information security team and department internally, maybe you could avoid this. That's typically not the case for, where we're seeing CMMC be applied. Generally, it's, okay, where do I begin? How do I get my head around this? We recommend starting with a gap assessment. A gap assessment, again, is not, nothing official under CMMC certification. It is basically an audit of your existing program to identify, as we state, the gaps with the CMMC controls that would be applied to you. Why this is valuable, it's a great way to start to develop your strategy. How far off are we? How mature is our operation? Are our gaps technical or procedural or policy based? What are the problems that we're facing? What's the roadmap to compliance going to look like? What's the cost to compliance going to look like? A gap assessment is a lower cost point in time assessment where you can start to get your arms around some of that idea if you're not sure where to begin to help define that strategy. So again, a gap assessment is essentially an audit of your current program compared to the CMMC. We're speaking level 2 requirements here. So, you're going to have, can be done internally. CMMC does put their own assessment details right out there on the DoD website. You can download, you could walk through it yourself. Again, if you're not familiar with it, or, if you have the capability to do that, you probably, again, wouldn't need a third party. But for the most part, this is where I do think it's really, truly valuable to have an expert, to have a information security expert that is familiar with and has been involved in these types of projects, because then you can be confident in the results of that assessment of this is something actionable for us. We can use this to determine our strategy and make decisions. Again, cost, time, people. These are business decisions, business strategy decisions that you want to be informed. So you'll go through a gap assessment. A reasonable timeline might be, depending on the complexity of your organization, kind of maybe 6 weeks, something around there would be plenty of time. Depending on how complex, less time could even be appropriate. And you're going to get a result out of that. You're going to have some comments on the statement of the maturity of your controls. You're going to have a gap register. You're going to have hopefully prioritize remediation efforts of, hey, this is documentation you need to improve. You can do that as you go. These are bigger ticket items of, you haven't clearly defined the boundary or scope of your systems, or you need to refine your system security plan. Those are all going to be the things that come out of that, which allows you to, again, kind of set that strategy and have basically what is a plan of action, a milestone type document. It is important to note that a POEM, POA, and a plan of action and milestone document is an official document under CMMC certification. You can be certified with a POEM. That is not, what comes out of a gap assessment. Again, a gap assessment is not a formal CMMC certification step. It is a readiness type step and effort to help you work towards that ultimate assessment. So, maybe just for ease of confusion, call it something else if you, have a risk register or gap assessment results that come out of that type of activity. And again, this is where it provides the value for your overall program planning. And again, how a gap assessment would be typically conducted will depend upon the firm that you use. Again, Microsoft DoD provides their output in a mock assessment that you can follow along. It could be done in simply as Excel. I'd recommend going with one of the many platforms out there that would support a CMMC type assessment, a risk platform, a risk management platform, whatever it may be. Again, our friends over at Monarch have developed a great solution for this. It's Security Catapult. It basically, if you're talking about a CMMC level 2 gap assessment, there's 110 level 2 controls. Many of those controls across the domains have multiple layers and parts and kind of questions and sub bullets to them. So Monarch has taken the work and gone through and broken those 110 controls into about 390, 400-ish declarative statements or questions that you can answer. So it makes it much more digestible for you. Instead of just reading the control language, which if you've read any official, DoD or other NIST standard, if you can make it through without falling asleep, good for you. If you can understand it, double good for you. So again, having a tool like that can help help explain to you, okay, how can I contextualize this? How can I take this, requirement statement and turn it into something actionable that I can measure, that I can assess against, and then I can develop an action plan around. Again, security, their product Catapult, and actually Joe was just informing me that they've released their 2.0 version. It has a built-in AI called Vanessa, which must be somewhat important to Joe, I assume. Maybe he can let us know on the inside scoop on the naming. But again, it's very helpful. It walks you through the certification process. You start with that gap assessment. It's built into the platform. As you're going through and completing that gap assessment, it's building a risk register for you. It's helping define your system security plan. It all flows the key components together, starting with that initial gap assessment. And again, if you're doing this on your own or with the help of a qualified third party, I think, again, looking for somebody that uses some type of tool that's going to create some efficiency for you is a great place to start. Beyond the gap assessment, if you've gone through a gap assessment, you've completed it, and now you've closed out your closed out any open items that you've had from assessments. There's other type of assessments that you would get into as you near that actual certification step, and Joe is going to take us through a few of those.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for mentioning the Catapult. We've had that out for a few years, and that's one of our gateways as we bring people in for assessment, using the Catapult to really level set and make sure everybody understands what these controls mean, especially if they've been doing it on their own for quite a while. It's a good kind of level set to make sure everybody really understands what that NIST language written by those guys up at Carnegie Mellon. It just makes your head spin. So we did our best to translate it. Even then, sometimes people can get lost. So it helps going through those questions. And it seems like a heavy lift. There's a lot in there. But it really helps people kind of, I need a policy for that. Like, yeah, you need to do that. And the really difference between that readiness or a gap, both of those used usually interchangeably. And then you go to a mock, is that kind of level of detail. When we do readiness and gap assessments, and I think Brian does the same thing, there's also sometimes a certain level of trust. Like, yeah, I know where that is. We could set that up. Oh yeah, our antivirus system does this. But then we actually go in and start looking at it, and nobody knows how to find that, or we can't find the setting for that. That becomes a problem. So one of the things we have started doing is, and we've gotten more requests for, is a mock assessment. People think they're ready, they're fired up, but they have staff maybe who've never been through something like this before. They don't know when to be quiet is one thing. If you've never been through an audit before, people at banking have gotten this now down for 20 years. You aren't asked the question, you don't answer. We find this problem up here in Maine all the time. We love to be helpful. We want to talk all the time. That's not a good trait when you're actually doing an assessment. You want people, they answer the question, or you can send an assessor down like a 6-hour rabbit hole they didn't need to be going down. So it's very important to kind of get people in flavor with what those are. But during the mock, we will go through every practice, and then on every practice, as Brian was alluding to, there are objectives. Sometimes there's just one, sometimes there's 12. And we will go through and walk you through each one of those, making sure you know where they are. So in a lot of ways, it parallels an assessment. It is not the same because we don't have to have the same staffing. Again, a mock is not a formal thing by CMMC or by the Cyber AB, who is the accreditation body. It is something we are permitted to do as assessors prior to. We just can't consult with you and tell you how to fix anything. If you find something that's not right, we have to mark it met. We can tell you why it's not met, but we can't tell you what you're supposed to do to fix it. So as long as we stay on the right side of that line, everything is fine. But we will only bring one assessor to the party, so we can do this at a much lower cost. It is more than a readiness, it's more than a gap assessment, but it is still about half of what we'd really do when we actually do the certification, because we only have to have half the people there. That sequencing we talk about, when to do what. We usually encourage people, if they're going to do a mock, to do it at least 8 weeks before their assessment schedule, just to make sure they have enough time to wrap it up. If you're really unsure and you really want to go through the ringer, maybe even a little more time, but give yourself enough time to remediate anything we find during the mock, because we want to make sure we don't have any issues there. One of the questions we actually hear a few times now, it's come up actually this week, I had asked this, is like, do I want to go through a mock with Brian and GraVoc and a consultant, or do I want to go through it with my C3PAO, or even with another C3PAO? What's my give and take there? And usually it's just it can become a risk decision of what am I going to get out of it, or what am I looking to get out of it? If you're doing a mock with somebody who's not your assessor, you are going to be able to get advice on how to remediate things. So if something's wrong, something's missing, the consultant can actually say, yeah, and you need to do this, or let's help you write that policy. Let's do that. If you're doing it with your C3PAO, they obviously, as I mentioned, can't do that. The upside of doing it with your C3PAO is you know exactly what they are looking for. We've turned your assessment as much as we can into an open book test. You know what's missing, you know what we're going to be looking for, you know when we're going to be looking for it and why. So we see people go down both roads. And again, it really depends on where you are in your journey. I think the closer you are to thinking you're ready for certification, you want to do it with your C3PAO because you want to make sure there's no mix-ups when you get in, no surprises. We don't want any surprises there. We really are big on making sure people get into their assessment and know exactly what it is we're going to be asking for. We're not there to fail you. We don't want to fail you. We don't want to come back. We don't have time. We have enough people kind of lining up through 2026 already. We want you to pass. We want you to pass the first time, and we want you to get through this. So that's very important for people. And whether you want to do one or not is completely up to you as an organization. It is not required. We are seeing more people asked to go through it, though, frankly. We are seeing a lot more people saying, you know what, it's worth that extra few bucks to make sure we're just doing this once. We're going to make sure everybody's on there. So